Hey guys, welcome to today's Sociocultural A-Level PE screencast. The focus today is part 2 of global sporting events. So the particular focus on this, or particular objective from the specification, is the political exploitation of the Olympic Games. So what we have to do then is we have to have an understanding of how the following 5 games were exploited for political reasons. Now, obviously, as sports enthusiasts, when we think of the Olympics, we're thinking about personal bests, we're thinking about world records, we're thinking about fantastic performances. However, not everyone thinks about it like that, and often politicians actually use, or countries use the Olympic Games as a vehicle by which to exploit certain beliefs they might have. So what we're going to do then, before we actually go into each of these, I'm just going to give you a framework by which you can answer any question on how these 5 Olympic Games were exploited effectively. So what we have to do, first up, we have to know where and when the Olympic Games was. Okay, so if I look over to here, you think straight away, so you look at these, all of these have a destination, so a country is not enough, it has to be the city and the year that the Olympics took place. Following that, you then need to know what specifically the political exploitation was. So if you look down to here, you've got some examples here. We will look at how you make this a little bit better or a little bit more exam focused when we go into the separate bits, but you can see here Third Reich ideology, you've got Black Power demonstration, blah blah blah, and we'll have a look at how they work. So there is for each of these separate Olympic Games, they are in this specification because they have a specific political exploitation. On top of that, we need to know who specifically was involved with this exploitation and how they carried it out. And finally, we need to know why. What was the underpinning reasoning behind the political exploitation of these games? Okay, so let's have a look then. Types of questions you might get. So if we have a look on this one, it's saying explain how the Olympic Games of 1936 in Berlin and 1968 in Mexico City were exploited for political reasons. So if we look at that straight away, that would mean that we would not need where and when with regard to the Olympic Games because it's already in there. What we'd have to be able to do is be able to link the specific political exploitation, who was involved and how, and why this exploitation was carried out. Now that's one example of a question. There's a 6 marker there, so you can see why you need to kind of segregate your response or your understanding behind the political exploitation using these key trigger questions. On top of that, the second question was this one. So we have a look at this. It basically now gives you the year, gives you the whens, but it doesn't give you the wheres. So you've got to be able to link the whens to the wheres, and then you've got to give the what with regard to the political exploitation. So they're the 2 questions. So there's a couple more, but obviously I don't want to put them all on this screencast. So that was how you would start this. So if we go on from there then, let's have a look. So first one we're going to have a look at, before we have a look at, these are the whats. So if we know that there is going to be 5 separate political exploitations of Olympic Games, these are the examples, these are the categories of political exploitation. So you've got something political propaganda, promoting a certain ideology from within a country or a regime. You have human rights as a category for political exploitation, or certainly protesting against human rights. And then going down to here, so you're protesting against terrorism or the use of terrorism, okay, to exploit political viewpoints. Okay, so if we have a look at this, that's the example. Whenever you answer what has happened, this would be in your answer. Then we have to go into detail about the who, the why, the hows. Okay, so have a look then. First one, Berlin Olympics 1936. Now this has got numerous names linked to it, so you could look at, it's been called the Nazi Olympics, the Hitler Olympics, and the reason behind that is because what we had then is the political exploitation was based around political propaganda, and it basically involved promoting a Third Reich ideology. Okay, or what did this mean? I mean, let's just write that down for now, so make sure you got it on the political propaganda promoting Third Reich ideology. So if we go down from there, how, who? Well, who was involved in this? Well, Hitler basically wanted to promote this idea that the Germans were kind of the most supreme race, and the Aryan race was the most supreme. And basically, if Hitler was the who, how did he do it? Well, he basically wanted to show that, Germany, or Nazi Germany, was so efficient that, you know, he did things such as making sure the stadiums were absolutely exemplary, they were completed on time, and athletes were training full time. So basically at this point, you know, obviously Olympic Games were examples of amateur events. They were not supposed to be fully funded and trained. There's, you know, in this case, Hitler went completely against that because he knew this was a world stage. It was the first televised Olympics where people could actually see how brilliant Germany were. Now, if we go on from here, what is the reason behind all of this? Why was it, you know, used? Well, basically, like I said there, to demonstrate Nazi Germany supremacy. Okay, that they were the best, to show Nazi Germany were the best to the world. Okay, so this is the example of how it worked. If you had an exam question, that is how you would do it. So, you know, going down from there, where, when, what, political propaganda, then. So if we go down to here, who, Hitler, how, showing German efficiency. Give some examples down there and why, so that they could show that Germany were the best country in the world. Okay, so from here then, a little footnote onto this, that if you are interested in this type of stuff, you might have heard about it. Hitler refused to physically place the black African American athlete Jesse Owens went into the when we're talking about Hitler promoting Nazi Germany's supremacy. We're talking about things that white people were the most effective. He couldn't understand that there could be people of colour that could actually be elite performers. So when Jesse Owens, who was a black African American sprinter, got 3 medals, well 4 if you include the relay, he refused to physically place that medal around his neck. So that is an example of how sometimes people talk about these games maybe not being exploited quite the way that Hitler wanted them to be. Okay, so if we go on from there, that's your first one. Next one. So we've got Mexico Olympics 1968. Okay, so for this one then, if we have a look at this, so we've got it on here very simply, as you can see on the picture here. This one has a very specific exploitation. Okay, so the exploitation was a black power demonstration. Okay, so who was involved? Basically, then you had 2 again African American athletes, Tommy Smith and Carlos Spencer, and basically they used the medal ceremony to wear black gloves and raise those fists in the air. Okay, and this was to demonstrate this kind of idea of black power. Okay, so I'm sure you can start to work out why this took place. So the reason why, it was basically to fight the lack of civil rights for black American or African American athletes at that time. So it was a symbol, in terms of the lack of civil rights or human rights for black American athletes at that point, or black Americans full stop. Okay, so again, a political exploitation called the Black Power demonstration. Your job is just to make sure you can get those key bits in there. So from there then, our next one to have a look at is the Munich Olympics 1972. So this one then, really interesting with regard to what happens here. So the Munich Olympics, this is a big chance for Germany to show that, they were over this kind of Nazi supremacy, this kind of political propaganda promoted by Hitler. Now what they wanted to do is put on a really good Olympics. However, it was marred by another political exploitation. So the political exploitation at Munich 1972 basically looked at the following. The terrorist attack is what happened, and this was the specific political exploitation. So from there, let's have a think. Who was involved? Okay, right, and how? So what happened then? So this was based around Palestinian terrorists, okay, and they basically took hostage and murdered 9 Israeli athletes, amongst other things, okay. And why did this happen? What is it based around? What are the underpinning factors behind it? Well, basically, the Palestinian people or terrorists wanted the release of native Palestinians imprisoned in Israeli jails. There were hundreds of Palestinians who were what they consider falsely imprisoned, and this is due to extreme hostility between Palestine and Israel. So if we have a look at this, there's obviously some political, geopolitical tensions between Palestine and Israel, okay, and this is the example of how they used the Olympics to exploit it. Okay, so again, terrorist attack, who by Palestinian terrorists took hostage and murdered 9 Israeli athletes. Other people got murdered, but in terms of this, if you don't have to remember the number actually. If you just said murdered Israeli athletes, you don't have to have the number. And then why? You can see that was a good way of sticking that in. So very little information, but just important that we try and get as much of that as we can. Okay. Right, next one then. So Moscow Olympics, 1980. So what happened here then? Well, this one was linked to a boycott. Okay, so if we have a look at it on here, so let's have a look at specifically the details behind it. So as we know, Moscow 1980. At this point, it's worth just remembering that Moscow wasn't Russia; it was the Soviet Union. So let's have a look then. Who and how was it exploited? Okay, so there's a political protest or boycott, and it was the USA, amongst other countries, but USA is the most powerful country here, refused to attend the Moscow Olympics. Okay, so nice and simple. Moscow 1980, there was a political protest or boycott. Okay, it was the worst attended Olympic Games in history. So if we get down to there, so who boycotted then? USA. Or America, okay, and they refused to attend this Olympics, and that's how they boycotted it. So, why? What was the reason behind it? Now, the key reason here is to do with the Soviet Union, which we now know as Russia, of course, invaded Afghanistan. And what happened here was that, Russia or Soviet Union at the time didn't like the fact that Afghanistan was proposing this westernization where they were going to become extremely powerful. So the Soviet Union sent in troops, invaded Afghanistan, of which America at the time did not agree with, or the Western world didn't agree with. So that in order to stop this, they made a big worldwide political protest by not going to the Moscow 1980 Olympic Games, which then led to other countries not going, which meant that it was a really poor spectacle on that one. Okay, so we've gone from there then. Our next Olympics basically is a bit of a tit for tat. So the next Olympic Games was in 1984, and it was at Los Angeles. Now, of course, I'm sure you can work out what happened here is exactly the same, political protest or boycott. So let's have a look then. So Los Angeles, 1984. You can see here the Soviet boycott. So we know where it is. We know when it was. Okay, now what we have to do is a political protest or boycott specifically. Soviet Union refused to attend the LA Olympics, so this was nice and easy. Okay, and what happened here? Why? Why did they do it? Well, officially, or their reasoning behind it was that. So their reasoning behind it was actually here. So what you had was that they said that there was a protest due to anti-Soviet Union propaganda. Okay, so basically they felt the Western world, America particularly, were creating this propaganda against the Soviet Union, and they cited the fact that they thought that they had security fears, but ultimately it was a complete retaliation with regard to the fact that. The previous boycott from America to Soviet Union or Moscow Olympics, sorry. Okay, so that's the key section there. Hopefully you feel that is okay. Make sure you structure your notes in the following way so you've got these key sections there. Okay, thanks very much.